Okay, welcome everybody to the Sustainable Health Live Chat. We've been introducing ourselves a little bit and getting started. And now we're going to be talking to everybody, and it's good to have you here if you're here live or if you're listening, as I know a number of people are going to be doing. So, all right, and let's see, how can I make this screen go? There we go, gallery view. All right, I like the gallery view once we get started. So I've got my friend Sam, and she was just telling, or what are your pronouns? We didn't put our pronouns down. Winterflower and I are all in a group where we always have to have our pronouns down, but we didn't do that. Are you still, what are your pronouns, Shannon?
Yeah, I go by she, her, or they, them.
She, her, they, them. Okay, good. And I know Shannon as Shannon, which is her professional name, but Sam is her her
My
friend
close
name.
friend's name, yeah.
Your close friend's name. That's good.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then I'm going to let everybody else, tell us a little bit of who they are. Like, tell us just who you are, where you are, and how you came to the live chat. Maybe that might be good. Oh, look, there, Winterflower's got hers up now. All right. So Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shannon Shula, aka Sam, and I am currently living in Olympia, Washington, and I am from the Hopi tribe, which is in northeastern Arizona. And as Susan said, I have an undergrad in geology, hydrology, and I have a master's in urban planning, city planning, and that's sort of currently what I do now. I'm from the village of Walpi, which is, I would say, probably the second oldest inhabited village, and it is probably the most picturesque. So if you Google Walpi, Arizona, it is the picturesque, Ansel Adams photograph of Edward Curtis of the Hopis. I don't have long swirly Q hair, but that is what we're known for. And a bunch of other Kachina ceremonies and a bunch of other things. Let's see what else. Yeah, I'm from the Sun, Eagle, and Reed clan. Yeah, I think that's about it. I've grew up on the reservation my whole life, and I still go home for ceremonies. I participate in a lot of ceremonies out home still, even though living up here in Washington. And I feel very fortunate to have grown up and have learned a lot of the traditions and customs from my grandmother. And so thank you for having me today, Susan. And I've known Susan since Arizona, I think when we were living in Tucson for graduate school. So she knows me, my ex-partner, and our two little kids who are now teenagers and adults. So, so thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. And we were talking a little bit before about being fearful and walking into this sort of dark, unknown spot, which is winter energy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm going to put the gallery back up again and let everybody. Let's see. No, that's not it. There we go. There we go. I think that's it. Okay, and let everybody tell Sam about who you are and how you got on the Sustainable Live Chat. What brought you to do that? So I'll start with you, Roberta. You have to unmute.
Hi, Sam. It's nice to see you. I've heard of you as Shannon. I now have a visual. I am she/her, and I've known Susan for several years. we've been friends and neighbors for a long time. I contributed a bit to her fabulous book, Sustainable Health, and I think Susan is a remarkable human being, and I try to participate in whatever I can with her work because it has made me a better person and given me a better life. So, so here I am.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right, Tamer, you're on next. You got on.
Oh God, I'm Tamer. I'm also part of the Tucson contingent.
But where are you now?
I am in West by God, Virginia, and wish I weren't, but I am.
Well,
But we're plugging along.
yeah. And Tamer actually was the first live chat when she told us, telling us all how she makes dandelion wine. That was way back this summer. So I'm gonna let Kay go next. And you're gonna unmute Kay. I don't know if she can unmute. She's trying to figure it out.
There we go.
All right.
I'm on the phone. I don't know what to do with this phone on Zoom, but anyway.
Oh.
Hi. Are we just introducing ourselves or something?
Yeah, just tell. Well, just tell Sam where where you are, geographically, and
Okay.
and you can tell him how you know me.
Yeah. Well, we're related, luckily. Susan is the sister of my husband, and this is the cat Apollo. We are in Brunswick, Maine, and we get to see Susan more in the summer than the winter, because that's when she's in Maine more. But even this past summer, we barely got to see you, it seemed. So we've been following these live chats as we've been able, and I'm particularly interested in anything that has to do with more sleep. And I'm a dancer in National Water Dance. So if anybody wants to hear about water dance, I'll tell you
That's
about
right. Oh, you'll have to talk. Maybe we'll have you as a live chat.
that.
Water dance, excellent. Because we're going to be in water season here. Winter is water season. So.
I think we're gonna like water season.
I think so. Hopefully. Yeah. All right. I'm going to put you back on mute, and Winterflower, I'll get you to come on and tell Sam where you are. And
okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet everyone. Sam. I am in New York, Queens County, St. Albans. I go with she, her, hers. I am Ramapo Lenape. I'm from Deer Clan and Haudenosaunee. So what else? I know Susan from groups that we're in, and I'm very happy to be here. Church, okay, church, UCSR, and this is the first time I'm being able to come because I have 50 million Zooms all the time. But I studied, like some natural medicine, herbs and herbal medicines. I took some classes and what have you. So I'm always interested in these things. So hopefully I'll be able to come back more often. Thank you.
And then you already know Marcia, but do you want to say anything, Marcia?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm excited that Sam is going to speak, which is why I tuned in, because I don't always tune in. So, but I know that it's going to be a good one, and that's it. I'm glad to be here. As you could see, my camera is not strategically located, so I'm going to turn my video off. And and hi to my favorite sister-in-law.
So, okay. So for those who are listening and don't know, Marcia is my wife. So, anyhow, so I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves except me and Shannon. We were starting a little bit of a conversation, and I want to kind of go into it a little bit more because I think I'm guessing, just looking at who's here in this group, that everybody who's here tonight is dealing with the same level of fear and trepidation about what we just have gone through with the election season and what we've been going through. I think that Shannon and I are both talking about what it feels like to have target on your back. And in many of our cases, there's multiple targets. Certainly women are going to no longer have control. You know, there's a deep movement in the political system to take away women's control over their bodies, sovereign control over your body, which is what the whole Roe v. Wade is. Certainly as gay people, we have that target on our back. And Shannon was talking about some of the other, you know, targets she has because, you know, being brown and being from, you know, different. So she was mentioning some of that, and you were telling me you live like a couple blocks from the Seattle Capitol building. So this is where all the protesters go. So you're really in the thick of it in that sense as well. So there's a lot of things to be afraid of, and when we talk about sleep, what I've learned from traditional Chinese medicine is that the most important thing for sleep is a peaceful heart. And how do we get to that peaceful heart when we are ruminating about all these other things, which is the monkey mind, I call it. But certainly it keeps me up at night. I think that there are other times. So how do we do that? And one of the ways is faith. And I think that, and we'll let Shannon talk some more about what she's learned through the ceremonies and the things that she's experienced and done, but that the faith has got to be in the natural world. The faith has got to be in the body. And when we talk about sustainable health, it's that faith that the body heals itself. When the cut, you know, you get a cut, you don't worry about, you know you're going to have new skin in a matter of days or weeks sometimes, but still the body can make new cells and has a remarkable ability to heal. And most indigenous healers used that understanding of the natural elements, understanding of energy, which we're as Westerners, we're doing a lot of Black Lives Matter stuff at our congregation, and eighth principle, which is about dismantling racism and institutional racism. So I'm going to talk about, I mean, I think white people or the colonizing culture has eschewed that trust in nature, and yet we see the planet trying to heal itself. We see, and part of that is the COVID. We talked about that way back in March, that the COVID, that the virus is in a sense a way that the planet is healing. We understand that being out of harmony and out of balance is really the source of illness, the source of disease, the source of, some people would even say, evil in the world. I think that and how do we get back in balance? And I know Shannon and I were having a conversation earlier in the week about what we were going to talk about here. So those are the kinds of things that I think when we can get ourselves in that place. And I said to Shannon in a text before we started, we're really going to have to teach what we need to learn tonight, because both of us are dealing, as most of us are, with uncertainty and that kind of stuff. So that's just sort of my little introductory spiel. And now I'm going to let Shannon say whatever she wants to say. You have to unmute yourself though.
All right. Okay. So, gosh, where to start? I mean, I think, yeah, Susan and I have been, I guess, through the many years that we've known each other. And I think, and I like to say, as, you know, she's always been like, a grandmother, kind of like mentor sort of for me. And, you know, when she met me, I was still kind of young and not realizing I think I didn't really realize, like, you know, growing up where I did, and all of this, like, all this knowledge that was being passed on to me from a very young age, you know, when you just kind of take it for granted, right? Well, at least for me, it was just like, I'm Hopi. Yep, I'm from the reservation. Yep, I just grew up with, you know, for me, it was more like, oh, I had to go and do all of these things, you know, like, I didn't have any childcare, or my mom didn't have childcare. So I went to the kiva and went into ceremony, and I learned all of these ceremonies with my grandmother. I had no idea what I was learning, you know, or my grandfather didn't have any sons or grandsons. So I got to go to the ranch with him. I had to go to the field with him. So, like, you know, as soon as I could walk, I was like going to the field every day, you know, in the summertime, I mean, in the spring, and planting corn, you know. And these are the things that we just, as being Hopis, like, what we learned. It was just, that was part of our daily life. So, you know, flash forward, you know, I go to boarding school, I go to college and start living in the city, and you know, you get used to kind of like all of the modern amenities that are at your fingertips, right? You can just go and get takeout food. You can just go get the groceries. I mean, even for us going to get groceries on the reservation, it was an hour to 2 hour adventure. You know, it was a huge journey to like get there. And a lot of people didn't even have vehicles, right? So it was just like, that was what we grew up with. We didn't have running water in our traditional home. We didn't have electricity. So when we had ceremonies, it was like we were hauling water. We were, you know, using water scarcely. All of these things that, you know, what we considered hardships. There's no technology, you know, and it was a really kind of like shift of focus, you know, of like our traditional and like cultural ways of like living off of the land, like a very simple way of life. And I didn't really realize all of these things that were kind of being, that I was being taught. So in going off to college and living in the city, it's taken me, and as I'm getting older, it's taken some time to kind of be like, oh, right, these are all of these things that like, that I kind of took for granted. And it's and now, like, in this political, you know, what's happening in our country, and then and then with COVID and the pandemic, it's kind of, you know, it's realizing all of these things, that it's like, oh, like, I have this generational knowledge of all of these things that have been taught from a child, from a baby, you know. And so when we're talking about like the winter and more preparation, like, one of the advantages that we had as Hopi people was that we were so isolated. We were up in the Four Corners. We weren't discovered really, you know, we had no major source of water, kind of like the tribes in the Rio Grande. So we were kind of left alone. And so that was really to our benefit, because, you know, Spanish came looking for the 7 cities of gold. They tried to establish missions there. They were struck by lightning. And we were kind of left alone. Oops, yeah.
Oops.
If that wasn't a sign. But because of that, and because there was really, you know, there was no resources for them, we were really left alone. And that was beneficial for my people, because we maintained and we preserved a lot of our cultural, our culture. We did. You know, it's interesting when I started going to visit some of the other pueblos, how there was a lot more kind of like influence of like of Christianity in church. And I was kind of like, I wonder why they're doing that, right? And then realizing that we didn't have that influence. So so with that, like a lot of our traditions and our ceremonies are still pretty intact. You know, like we have a ceremonial calendar that we just finished up in October, which was like which is the harvest moon. You know, now we're kind of going into November, which is Gelmoya, which is like the initiate moon. It's like the time of the year for like the men to start, like, you know, to go into certain ceremonies so that they become men. And then in December, which is Gelmoya, which is like, it's the moon of respect, and this is where it's like really, really changes, right? It's like it's cold, it's winter, it's the time of respect, it's the time to be quiet, it's the time when the earth is at its thinnest. You know, you're not, you know, you have to go, we would have to be home before the sunset. You know, we weren't allowed to bounce balls because the earth is so fragile that it would crack. But at that time, that was really important for us, because that's when we sat around the fire, right? We sat and it's all about storytelling. It was about family, it was about resting and teaching the traditions of storytelling during these times. You know, and when we would go up to like the ceremonial homes, there was no electricity, there was no running water. You know, you're like by gas stoves or, you know, gas lanterns. So, you know, we would play with these like string games, or we would just like sit there and my grandma would sing to us, or that was all we had. You know, you might have had like a radio, but as soon as the batteries died, that was it. You know, even to this day when we go home, you know, the kids have their cell phones or their devices, but they know like we have to like use this very sparingly, because, or I'm like, go ahead, use it all, because after it dies, we're not going back down below to electricity for 4 more days. So you're stuck with just sitting in silence. And so that's kind of like for, you know, I said, you know, we have all of these different times, and then January is like when things kind of start kicking back up, you know. So at the end of December, it's like we welcome the cold, we welcome the snow, we welcome all of that, because it's that time for everyone to be quiet and peaceful and to just be at rest. And a lot of, and when we say when we're Hopi people, it's like we say that we didn't, you know, we chose these areas to live where it was very dry conditions, there was no water, and it's very cold. It was kind of like a test to us as people of like survival in these like very harsh conditions, and that was a choice that we made as people. Yeah, so that's
It's
kind of
like, an act of faith,
right,
like a you know, a whole national act of faith, in a sense, of your nation, of your community.
Yeah, and so then, you know, then when we finish this winter, then we'll like start, you know, in January, we'll start a whole start of a new cycle of like the earth reopening and like germination and planting. And then we'll do all of our ceremonies to be about singing and dancing and praying for rain. It's all because we're dry farmers. You see the conditions out there. It is dry. It is amazing that much corn and crops grow, you know, and so then that starts a whole cycle again of like planting and then dancing all through spring, our Kachina ceremonies, and then in the summertime it'll be social dances, and then fall, harvesting, women's ceremonies, you know, preparation of all of those, you know, drying up the corn and the seeds and like properly storing those, and then, you know, then the men's ceremonies, and then we start all again. It's just like constantly doing that same thing. And I feel like we must be doing something right. That's how our people survived for many, many, many years, and still in the same
Centuries,
place, and
millennia.
still in the same buildings and the same dwellings, and we're still there. So,
It's knowledge that we could all benefit from. I think at this point, I think that this is kind of what I wanted to do with the sustainable health, is to help people realize that what we have at our disposal, and that and how important it is to get back in tune, back in touch with the natural world, and understand those energies. I know when I first got to Tucson from the Northeast, and it would be a rainy, cloudy day, and everybody I knew who grew up in Tucson would say, "Oh, what a beautiful day," and I would think, "It's what are they talking about? The sky is overcast. It's raining. It's this." But by the time I moved back to New York, some 15, 20 years later, I would look out the window on a cloudy, overcast day and say, "Oh, what a beautiful day. What a beautiful rain." Now, I've been here a while now, and one of the things that I've been really struck by is how much people that I know are like, "Oh, I want sunny days. I want sunny days. It's a great day." And I realize, when you are in a warming climate, in a warming planet, you don't want sunny days. And much as I hate to shovel snow, and I do, at some point, I'm really working on this season to embrace that, and to welcome the snow and to welcome the rain, because I've noticed just in the last few years, the dryness, particularly this summer, the trees were falling all over the place, and we were losing our electricity fairly regularly in Maine. And some of that has to do, I think, with the fact that the ground is dry, the roots do not go down, because the roots only go to get the water. And we need to take a page from the Hopi and say, Shannon and I were talking, and I was saying, it's like calling the rain and calling the snow. And you were saying to me, no, it's not a calling, it's a welcoming. We don't really have that power, but we can ask for that gift, as I understand it. Am I getting that, Shannon, or Sam, or is that off?
I mean, I think that is it. We welcome, we're always calling, I mean, I guess in a ways in our ceremonies, we call it, right? Because every ceremony is all about praying for rain, and we're dancing for rain, and and I think a lot of people are always kind of astounded by, and could be in the middle of the summer, right? And we're having a dance, and there's not a cloud in the sky. And when they say you have a good heart, you have a good heart, and your prayers are met. And I've seen, a lot of people have seen it and witnessed it, of just blue skies, nothing for miles, and then boom, the clouds will come out of nowhere, and it'll be a torrential downpour, and the smell of the desert is just, but it is, that is what it is. We hold water very sacred, our springs, everything is based around water, and it is, it is sacred. We don't use it, we treat it with respect, and we use it sparingly.
Because it's really precious in the desert. And I think that we have lost sight of that, and particularly as the white colonizing people that came to this country, not only did they steal the land, but they also trashed it, I think. And I think that's the real sin, that's the real disharmony, that's the real, that's what we need to heal. Every one of us needs to heal, and every one of us needs to call and welcome the water and the rain. I mean, we really only need 3 things to live. One of them, the number one thing is oxygen, and we depend on the plants for that. Without the plants, there's no oxygen. That's what's wrong with Star Wars. There's no plants on those planets. Without plants, there's no oxygen. So we need air, and we have something like 3 minutes before we go down if we don't have it. And then water is the next thing that we need. And there's the science, like if you think about the rain just coming over the land, it doesn't come over the land that far, just off the ocean. But the plants, in fact, draw the rain to them. That's science that they're realizing now, that the plants do that. So water is so critical, and to have clean drinking water. And without that, we have like something like 3 days. So you have 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 days without water. And earth is the third thing, because that's where the food grows. And without that, you can go, so they say 40 days without food, but we need water. And I think that when I talk, and every now and then I think about writing a sequel to Sustainable Health that I would call Sustainable Healing, which would be about what do we do to reverse some of the changes that we made, and thinking about, if you want to stop warming, think of my computer is hot, my phone is hot, my lights are hot, my heat is hot, my refrigerator is hot, all of those things. And yet, when I go to Maine, I have much less of these comforts, and in fact can be very comfortable. And I think that we've become fearful of going without all of our amenities. And in the city, the trash magically disappears, and you turn on the water and it comes out of the faucet. And one of the things that we talked about in autumn was gratitude. So I talk about like the emotion that you're dealing with. What's the habit of, sort of this spiritual habit that balances that emotion out. So for fear, I think faith is what balances it out. But when we were in this last season of autumn, we were talking about grief and gratitude. And I remember listening, I think it was Louise Hay talking about gratitude was so important, and that every morning when she would wake up, she would start by being grateful for the comfortable bed she was lying in, like all the things you can be comfortable for. And I know when I was dealing especially a lot with depression, I would wake up in the morning and I would say, I can breathe this air. I can breathe this air. I can walk out of this room and I can turn a faucet. I can have not only cold running water, but hot running water. And the Sun King, Louis XIV, would have killed his grandmother for that. That's, such an amenity that we take completely for granted. And I have a refrigerator full of food. I have, people that I love. I have people that love me. I have work that I like to do. I would sort of run through all those things. And I think for me, that's a really important part of coming to terms, and I did, coming to terms with some of the really hard things that we're going to have to be doing, and walking through our fears, and that's kind of part of what I'm hoping that we can begin to do. This is the winter season, as you were talking about, Shannon. You had all these things that came to you through the ancestor, through your family, through your community. Our genetics, in traditional Chinese medicine, genetics is associated with water energy, development is associated, child development, that kind of thing, associated with water, and wisdom, I think, is also associated with water, but maybe all the elements of their own wisdom. I think that's probably more accurate. So do you have anything more you want to add, Shannon, or should I open it up for other people's questions and comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it'd be nice to get some, some questions or comments, and it would be a nice discussion. I mean, I feel if anyone wants to know anything more, I mean, I feel like we, covered a lot.
Scratching the surface.
Yeah.
But yeah.
True.
So yeah. So has anybody got any questions, comments?
I do. I have a question. I want to ask Sam, if God forbid you or anyone in your family were to become seriously ill, would you turn to native medicine or would you go to a Western doctor or both?
I guess it would really depend on the type of illness. We do, we have a lot of medicine men out there. There are certain things that we go for healing. For example, I could say I was struck by lightning when I was 11, and I went to Western medicine, went and got poked and prodded, to different Indian hospitals, like from the local to, Albuquerque, and they didn't know what was wrong with me. I completely quit walking. Like, didn't hit me immediately, but a couple days later, I couldn't feel from my waist down. I was paralyzed. I had no idea what was going on. Well, what it did is that the strike was so strong that it did something to my spinal system. It disrupted something. It had so much energy in me. So I went to Hopi medicine then, because afterwards, like, people didn't know what was going on, and then finally it came out because we were kids, and they were like, "Oh yeah, when we got struck by lightning," and then they were like, "Wait, what? What happened?" So then they had this whole ceremony, right, with this medicine man who was from the water clan, because lightning is associated with water, and so they had a ceremony. So I had to do the ceremony, and in a couple of weeks, like, I started getting sensation back in my legs. So, so yeah, it's a combination. I guess it really depends on what it is, right? But yeah, there are some things that I would prefer to go to a medicine man and seek spiritual guidance and like more traditional medicine. And there are some things that I do, more aligned with that. I think a lot of the stuff too, a lot of our ceremonies are very healing. I think a lot of, I think we all suffer from some sort of like emotional stress or, depression or certain things like that. And, for me, like, that is really, really important, is to go home and when I ever, feel like I call it, like, when I'm lost, right? I've been hanging out in the Bahana world too much. I have to go home because that's my recentering. I have to be home with my people, singing in ceremony, or just being in that space, or like walking barefoot behind the mesa. There's something about, even with my kids who are like, I call them, they're urban Indians, right? But I can see it in my son when he goes home. There's like this connection with the land and our ancestors when we go home, that it's completely, it's rejuvenating. Like, I can go home and be in ceremony for 8 days, and when I come out, I feel like a completely different person. And that's my sustenance. That's my life, So, yeah.
Thanks. I think that if you get hit by a truck, you need to go to the emergency
Yeah.
room. If you feel like you've been hit by a truck, you need to go to the medicine man. The traditional, chronic illnesses don't do well with Western medicine.
Well,
We
my
don't have a lot
grandmother,
to offer.
my grandmother always told me, like when I was like had to go to the doctor, she's like, if you're not bleeding or something, you're not going to the doctor. That was the only time I got out of chores too. If something wasn't broken or was like physically bleeding. Otherwise, I was good enough to wash dishes till midnight. So
So I think, Kay, did you have your hand up or was it?
Yeah, I had a question. I've been wondering about the calendar and about winter starting November 1st, and if that's something to do with Chinese medicine or something. I mean, we're usually trained to think winter starts December 21st and it goes until March 20th or something like that. Is there another reality in which winter has different, bracket dates that you're using? I'm just curious about that. And does winter last different lengths of time and all that?
Do you want to talk about that? I can answer that from a different perspective, but do you want to talk about, because I know your calendar matches pretty much with the one that I know from both the Celtic Wicca kind of, your Northern Europe, and also with traditional Chinese medicine, but I'm going to let you talk about your calendar.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, ours is it does start for us kind of like the new year sort of in December, sort of around that time. It's like the marking of the new year, so it does align, like Susan said, with like the Chinese New Year.
That's when your spring kind of begins, doesn't it?
Well, like January, February really is kind of like that sort of that germination with our
Right.
with our bean dance,
Okay.
with our Kawamoya. So, but yeah, I think the way that I think of it is like, you have your harvest stuff in like October, November, and that's kind of like when things are really slowing down. And then the winter month is really like December. It's just this quiet time, So for us, it's kind of like that quiet time, and it's like it's starting a new year for a lot of different things. So.
And the winter, the cold winter is much shorter in Arizona, although you're in the high desert, so it's a little bit longer than what I was used to in the low desert. But I think that, so from my perspective, I think about the seasons waxing and waning in the same way the moon does. Mm-hmm. So Halloween marks the turning point from the new season, if you will, of fall. And then winter solstice is like the full season winter. And then it begins to dwindle. And then at Groundhog Day, which used to be called Candlemas, or it's had other names in Europe, in Northern Europe, that's again that shift into the germination. So the sap begins in the north, in the northeast of this country, that's when the sap begins to rise in the trees. And that's that first, beginning. So we don't necessarily see it happening. But usually by February 2nd, you're noticing, the days are getting longer, because the turning point is December 21st, but I don't really notice that the light has changed until somewhere around February. And I know, but yeah, so we want to hold on to these little fixed things. So, but the seasons are a constant change. And I think that the more, Dr. Lou's always saying, you got to go with the flow. You got to go with the flow. I think the more you can understand that that it's a river, if you will, time, and it's
Right, and
always
then I
changing.
think, and ours is very, you know, like everything is kind of very circular for us, you know, so it's like it's not really, and it's all based on the moon, right? So it's kind of like constantly, all our ceremonies are based on looking for the moon. It's all about looking
Right.
from the moon, finding the moon, and then that is when you count the days. It's never, it doesn't fall on weekends. It's not a Sunday. It's all about, you know, and if it's a cloudy day and you can't find the moon, then you just kind of wait until you find the moon, you know. But, and so that, you know, and then that's constant, you know, it's changing, right? And it's a circular thing. It's about, it's all based on like the crops, and, you know, you think about that. So when you harvest, you're kind of ending your season, you're ending your year, and then you're getting ready to kind of just like hibernate and rest. And so then once, you know, January comes, when that moisture starts to come, that's when things start coming alive again. That's when you start preparation. And it's all about preparation for that spring and the summer for the next harvest. And then it just same thing goes, you know, it's very busy. It's like my mom always says, you know, and my grandmother is like, a Hopi life is not, it's not an easy life. You're constantly busy. You know, when I talk to my mom, she's always shelling corn, like doing something, because it's like you're just constantly busy. And that's where, you know, when we live in, that's where we have this disconnect of like being able to live off the land and be one with the land. And it's interesting now, like this new generation of millennials and being in city planning, I'm noticing, you know, I was just hanging out with a friend the other day, but like her daughter, they're like in their late 20s, and they're talking about like purchasing land and living off the land, and what does it mean to be in community. Because of this pandemic and with the different elections, there's this drive to be not living in cities, to kind of really reconnect with the land. And I think that's been a very interesting thing to see from a planning perspective, of like this migration from city centers to more rural areas, and where we see a huge influx of people coming from California to Washington, right? Because Washington is the evergreen state. We have lots of water. And it was one of the reasons that I wanted to come up here is that being in Arizona, where water is scarce, the government entities are not planning for long-term survival. You know, that is where you see the most urban sprawl, the cheapest land and the cheapest water. I come to Washington, my water bills are more expensive. Everything is a lot more expensive, and there's much more in, you know, growth management. It's all about preservation of critical areas, which is completely changes the entire how we plan things. You know, development is a lot harder. A lot of these things is a lot more difficult, but that's the way it should be. That's the way, you know, it needs to be in order to be able to sustain and
Long term.
for us to survive long term.
So do you have any other comments or questions or anything? So we're going on 8 o'clock here. And I don't know, Shannon, you know, we didn't talk about this, so I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Do you have any prayer or words or anything that you could offer us at an end? And I've got something I can offer too, so we can both offer, or you can say I'll pass and you go, or however you want to do that. I just didn't know if there's anything that you know, and as I said, I didn't tell her any of this before because it just popped into my mind right now. So, and that's the other thing, water is that the intuitive, this is when we get the download, just like when we're sleeping, you get the download from the universe. So I'm going to respect my download that said, let's end with something that faith-based. Do you have something?
Yeah, I don't have anything right offhand. I'm that kind of, yeah,
I can do mine, and then if something comes
Sure.
to you, you can do it. And otherwise, it's because I really should have given you a memo about that earlier, at least at 6:30 when we first started talking, right? So I do a bead meditation that I developed when I was in graduate school that connects with the elements and with women. The original one was all about women. And each bead had a song, a prayer. This is something that I learned in, I think I was in Michigan or somewhere, Z Budapest, I believe. But we all come from the goddess, and to her we shall return like a drop of rain flowing to the ocean. And it's kind of a round, so you can sing it on, all 50 of the beads in the meditation. So.
Yeah, sorry, I don't really have anything right now.
That's okay. You don't have to. But I think that I just, this is that season. I urge, everybody to do you have something, Winterflower? She's always good in our meetings. No, she's shaking her head too. No, don't put me on the spot. She's done 5 Zooms already today, probably, right? Yeah, okay. But I think that we'll do some more of that. I think this is that time. This is the time, as you say, for the quiet, for the meditation, for the earth being thin. This is, in the Northern European traditions, they talk about the thinning between the worlds, but it's that same concept, and the ability to get in touch, to be quiet. And we're going to work on sleep, and also going to be doing a standing, like the whole body, starting with the feet and working our way up. So each week, for the people who are on that Patreon, the subscribers, I'll be sending a little video about what to do to get in touch. And we'll be barefoot. That's the first thing, is to get your feet on the ground and make that contact with the earth. It ultimately helps with low back pain and other kinds of things, the moving of the energy. So thank everybody for coming tonight, and I'll see you all in a couple of weeks, or I'll see some of you in a couple of weeks, I hope. So I'm gonna